This program is made possible by a grant from the Pennsylvania Public Television Network.
Long before video games and battery-operated toys, children played with tin toys, some with wind-up and friction motors. Those simple toys, many made by Louis Marx and Company, are valued today by antique toy collectors throughout the world. These shiny, colorful mementos chronicle over 50 years of toy making by a company that grew to employ 8,000 people in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Europe, and the Far East. Today, the toys made by Marx are keepsakes that record the rise and fall of a Tin Toy Dynasty. Louis Marx, founder of the Marx Toy Company, employed thousands of loyal workers who remained at Marx Toys for 20 and even 30 years. Yet few of them knew or even met Marx. One long-term employee who worked closely with Louis Marx was Raymond Lohr. Lohr began as a model maker in 1933 and is still active in toy design today. He remembers Marx well.
Louis Marx was one of the most dynamic and successful businessmen in America. In addition to being a super salesman, an inventor, a super manager, he had a brilliant personality that made him hundreds of firm friends around the world. His business philosophy was to give the public big value by means of mass production and mass selling to such giants as Sears Roebuck, Montgomery Ward, Woolworth and Kresge, and large wholesalers. From 1935 until about 1960, he ran the largest toy company in the world, and it remained among the top 3 or 4 until he sold it in 1972.
Charles Marx, Louis's nephew, was the advertising manager and later a sales executive at Marx Toys. He recently toured the former Marx facility in Girard, Pennsylvania, which now houses several manufacturers. Charles reminisces about his family's involvement in toy making.
My father and uncle were born in Brooklyn, New York. My uncle started working for the F.J. Strauss Company at age 16. Basically, by today's standards, that would be a young age to begin work, but I believe the times were such that that was not uncommon. And I believe he went to work for S.J. Strauss, not because it was a toy company, because it was an opportunity for employment.
The tin toys Strauss made earned him recognition as the founder of the mechanical toy industry in America. Marx learned quickly from Strauss and soon excelled in the toy business. By 1916, only 4 years after he began working for Strauss, Louis Marx had become a company director and was running the New Jersey factory. But Strauss disagreed with his young prodigy when he recommended a switch to mass production, and Marx was fired.
I've heard that my uncle started the business, and then my father subsequently joined him and related to his mother, my grandmother, that he was going to keep my uncle company, and therefore the company was called Louis Marx and Company.
In 1921, Marx opened a manufacturing facility in Erie, Pennsylvania, with dies purchased from Strauss.
I recall 2 of the early toys as being the most successful ones. That was the Climbing Monkey and the Bojangles minstrel toy. Several versions of that were made prior to that. But I believe they sold over 8 million of each of those, and the Climbing Monkey is still being made in some around the world today.
Marx's Climbing Monkey is demonstrated by a former Marx employee, Ken Furman.
Well, this is what they called a climbing monkey for obvious reasons, and someone else had made one years ago, but Louis picked up on it, and this is one of his first products, and it was a very popular one, and this is where they got the name that they used to call Marx Toys the Monkey Works. That was a pet name for the place. It reflected back to this monkey.
When Louis Marx was a young person, a salesperson, he represented the Strauss Company and the Lehman Company, and he had representation for a company that was great mechanical works. And this is the Alabama Coon Jigger from 1903. And as you can see, it had great detail and great animation. Later in his career, 1948, he took the same mechanism that Lehman and Strauss used in the early 1900s and used it to mechanic or animate his Walt Disney Donald Duck duet. Very similar in animation.
My uncle represented the manufacturing companies that were located in Girard, Pennsylvania, Erie, Pennsylvania, and Glendale, West Virginia. Eventually, he became such an important factor to them that he was able to buy them.
By the mid-1930s, Marx was already a millionaire. The Toy King was building his kingdom. He was known as the Henry Ford of toys because he introduced high-volume production. Like Ford, he made his product available to the masses and used his extraordinary sales abilities to bring in orders that kept the lines running. Yet he and his brother David only occasionally visited the manufacturing facilities.
Well, my uncle, and for that matter my father, rarely visited the plants. I think there's probably, can be counted in single digits, the number of times either one were here, and that was primarily because the people here were so capable and they became an extension of his intellect.
Marx employees were not only capable, but loyal. One 29-year employee of the Marx Company, the last to leave the Erie facility, remembers a Louis Marx visit.
I met Louis Marx once, and he came down in the summer. He was a short man, very wiry, always on the go, and everything had to be precision. He did have another man who did come down all the time, who was Mr. Marcus, and he was Mr. Marx's right-hand man.
Noted author and antique toy collector Maxine Pinsky uncovered numerous anecdotes about Louis Marx while researching her series of books on Marx toys.
Louis Marx was a very shrewd man. When he went on buying trips to Germany, traditionally the leader of the toy industry, he took an interpreter with him. Now, Louis Marx could speak German fluently, but he didn't want anybody to know that, so that he could pick up a great deal of what was said and learn many things that he might not have learned otherwise.
The mass production of Marx toys made them affordable for almost everyone. But today, many of the toys sell for unusually high prices.
It's ready to go, George the drummer, and he's in the box. Start him along. Give me 50 bucks for him. 50, thank you. 75, now 100, 30. 130 now 5, 135, 135 now 140 now 145, 45, 45 now 150, 194 and 180, 194 and 180, 190, 185. Are you all in, folks? All done? Sold him. 180 chairs right there in the doorway. Number 95 is your buyer, number 95.
Collectors of every age can be found at auctions, toy shows, and antique sales looking for a special Marx toy to complete their collection.
Okay. Thank you.
Marx toys are special. They stand out from other toys because of the beauty of the artwork, the vibrant color, the amusing action, the tremendous range, and the immediacy of their looks. There's something very appealing about Marx toys. You want to play with them. They're fun. In Marx toy collecting, variations are a very important part. And Marx toy collectors try to get every single variation that ever existed of a particular toy, sometimes over 20 different variations.
Louis Marx made several gas stations. Maybe they were a half dozen in number. This is one variation. Represented here is an oil and grease island, and I'd like to point out two accessories. Accessories brought realism to the toy. Here we have the motor oil cart that was favored by the oil stations in that era, and here we have the radiator water can that fed the radiators. Here we have the Louis Marx roadside rest station, and one of the outstanding features of this is not often pointed out, and that is Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy painted into the rest station by the artist that set this gas station up. It represents the mid-30s, the Depression years.
This is a Marx Honeymoon Express. It was made in different time periods. Particular models were made in the late 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's a very cheap tin tabletop amusement toy, and roughly the value of these things go for $100 to $150 depending on condition. But it's fragile, and not very many of them survived. This is a Marx toy made in 1955, 1956 for Sears, Roebuck and Company. It was sold around Christmas time for $59.95, which was a pretty expensive toy for that time. This can hold up to a 40-pound child. It's a very strong motor to it. It's powered by a 6-volt hotshot battery. It's a very rare toy. Today it runs roughly around $1,000 to $1,200.
One of the unique things about Louis Marx being a good businessman and a good assembly line artist is that he used the same steel stampings as evidence with the Popeye parrot cage and the Popeye trunk, the Mortimer Sturd drummer, the Hometown drummer, and the Charlie McCarthy drummer. Is if you can see that the toys are made on the same steel stampings, different lithography, and different heads. So Louis would come up with a different toy each year using the heads from the last year, so saving on economy and money in design. One of the prize parts of my collection are the Amos and Andy Fresh Air Taxi and Amos and Andy Walking Pair. Louis was famous for meeting the trends of the times, and Amos and Andy were very, very popular in the 1930s from cartoon characters designed by Corel and Gosden. And so Louis had these particular toys manufactured in tin. Both of these are in original condition. The arms on either one of the walking pairs are very fragile and therefore did not last very long.
The beautifully lithographed tin toys were eventually replaced by plastic, the modern preferred production material of the late 1950s. But realism and detail continued to be Marx trademarks, as figure collector Glenn Ridenauer recalls.
It's almost like they were making this attempt to completely copy reality in plastic form. The figures they did are of every variety. You have dollhouse figures that show the family, and of course one of the popular themes was conflict, war, military figures, soldiers, cowboys against Indians, knights against Vikings. Another thing that Louis Marx was quick to pick up on was any kind of a pop culture phenomenon that happened to be prevalent during the day. And Zorro was a very popular series back then, and there's another Marx figure that just shows a great amount of kinetic energy, even though it's a static piece of plastic. There's a lot of drama in these pieces. Marx was very quick to take advantage of any licensed products, anything related to any other forms of media, like comic books, comic strips, TV, movies.
Marx capitalized on merchandising and licensing early in his career, as collector Jack Gensler relates.
This toy was made by Marx in 1939. It was a promotional gift given away at the theaters for the movie Pinocchio. You wind it up, goes across the floor, his tail turns him over, and he rolls over and keeps on going. This toy, which was given away free, is now worth between $200 and $300.
Marx used innovation to stay ahead of his competition. For example, he was one of the first toy manufacturers to make train sets affordable for the average child, one of many trends he set and others followed. But his trend setting didn't pertain only to toys.
Right. Well, one of the eccentricities that relating to my uncle, he was always, for many, many years, and actually an incredible number of years, was running. In those days it was called running. And he would go up on the roof and run for hours at a time, and everybody used to think he's nuts. Well, today it's called jogging. And maybe what we thought was eccentric was his tremendous intuitiveness, or his ability to see in the future. So as I look around today, you see people running all over the road, lunch breaks or exercise breaks, and my uncle was doing this as long as I can remember, for a lot longer than I could possibly do it. And again, that was just one eccentric way he was ahead of his time.
Marx, the businessman, was described as eccentric and brilliant, but his private life revolved around his family.
My uncle's first wife, my Aunt Rainey, passed away at a very young age. I believe she was 32 or 35, whatever. And he had 4 children by my Aunt Rainey. It was my cousin Barbara, Louis Marx Jr. was his second, my cousin Jacqueline, and finally Patricia. Then he remarried and had 5 boys by his second wife, and he called them the first and second shift. Now, my uncle over the years became very friendly with some generals of World War II era, and he named all of his 5 sons in the second shift after generals.
As a close friend of General Eisenhower, Marx was one of the first to push him toward the White House and support him in every way.
My father and uncle were part of the team or group that prevailed on General Eisenhower to become a Republican candidate. In fact, during the 2 elections, Erie and I'm sure Gerard contributed also, made several pins and mementos to raise money and for campaign contributions.
Marx later introduced presidential figures that weren't big sellers, but they were a tribute to the Marx-Eisenhower friendship. Marx the Toy King was a popular man of his time. The December 12, 1955 issue of Time magazine featured Marx on the cover. Described as a popular patron of the posh clubs of New York, Marx always had a pocket full of toys to give away to friends and business associates. Today, many of those giveaways are most valuable and rare. Disneykins, among others, were favorite Marx handouts. As a savvy businessman, Marx was a master at merchandising, but he spent little on advertising, only $500 in 1955.
One of the few things that my father and uncle followed somebody else on in the toy industry was advertising. Mattel began with their sponsorship of the Mickey Mouse Club in around 1956 with a huge success, and finally in 1959 they decided that this perhaps was something they should consider doing, but not having faith in the longevity of advertising as a tool, they assigned it to me to be in charge of it, and we hired the Ted Bates advertising agency and subsequently made a tremendous number of commercials, 1 or 2 which won awards.
You're looking down the barrel of the nuttiest, the goofiest, the wackiest gun ever. It's the Super Duper Goofer gun by Marx that shoots 15 colored goofer balls, and the last ball goes...
Right indoors, right outdoors, right near or far, in a race cart, on a pony, in an old-time car.
3 great ways to ride by Marx.
That's not Dad's, it's his. The toy power workshop that looks like real, works like real. The exciting new Shop King by Marx.
A little girl becomes a lovely lady with a vanity all her own.
It's divine.
Bargain-priced budding beauty vanity.
Let me take a shot at him. Careful, he's pretty ferocious.
Get bargain-priced Boppa Bear by Marx. Get the most thrilling space toy ever made, kids. Get the...
Mystery Spaceship by Marx.
In this corner, Lucky Graziano. In this corner, the Challenger.
They're slugging it out in the middle of the ring. A right to the jaw.
My block is knocked off.
But you can press it back on again.
I'm Magic Marxie, bringing fun. Marx makes more toys than anyone.
The toy business is a unique business. Obviously, it involves a lot of creativity. They say in every man there's a little boy. Well, it allows us to be little boys.
Marx employees, kids at heart, recall their toils as a labor of love.
Marx Toys employed hundreds of women in the plant, and they all enjoyed their work. Every time I walked through, they seemed to be having a wonderful time. They worked hard, and they seemed to enjoy every minute of it.
The job satisfaction was incredible. I mean, it was one of those places, as hard as this may seem to a lot of people, where you couldn't wait to get into work and you didn't want to go home.
It was fun going to work. We had a good time. I'm going to say it was like one big family.
One of the things I found interesting when I was writing the book was the family atmosphere of the Marx employees. They really felt like they were family, and they felt that if Marx existed today, they would still be working there. They really liked the work. It gave them a chance to be creative, even though it didn't pay as well as it might. They had the freedom to really experiment and try different things.
One of the experiments of the late 1950s resulted in the biggest breakthrough in toy manufacturing, the big wheel.
I was in charge of the big wheel. The product development part was mine. All the engineering involved in deciding how to make the thing from the assembly standpoint and from the state of art in the plastics division as it was at that time. Needless to say, the big wheel was an absolute breakthrough. There was nothing like it ever in the world before. And it came about by an idea from my boss, who was Raymond Lohr at the time. And he happened to remember that when he was a child, he used to turn his bicycle upside down, and for some reason or other it seemed a little more exciting to ride it that way rather than the proper or normal way. And we sort of kicked around, well, how in the heck would we make this thing out of plastic and maybe even make it even more exciting? All of the various tests and the child testing and all that sort of thing that we did, which took months and months and months to work out some of the bugs and make it stronger and with this place and that place. A lot of those things went into the United States government Consumer Product Testing booklet and the Toy Manufacturers Association booklet. You can take them out word for word. They've been refined somewhat, but the tests that we devise are now standards for that type of vehicle. When Marx was finally sold, there were probably around 7 million that were manufactured by Marx alone.
With major successes like the big wheel, everyone wonders what happened to the Tin Toy Dynasty, the kingdom built by Marx, the Toy King.
The company was in business for over 50 years, and they reacted to an offer as far as selling the company. This is the first time they ever thought of it, and the offer was from R.J. Reynolds Company, which today is known as RJR. But they were diversifying out of the tobacco business, and they'd made some small acquisitions. They'd spoke to my father and uncle and the principals of the company for over 4 years, and they finally decided not to go into the toy business. So that started my father and uncle to think that possibly now, at their age, one was, I believe my uncle was 72, my father was 68, that possibly they should think about getting out of the business. And at the time, the cereal industry had acquired several toy companies, and through friends on Wall Street in the investment banking community, they bought Quaker Oats, and Quaker Oats made an offer, and it was done very quickly. And that was the end of my father and uncle's career. They were out, retired very quickly, and unfortunately, a very short time later, the business was sold and it went eventually into receivership. Very quick ending to a very successful company.
I worked liquidating all of the machinery which was sold at auction, and also gathered all of the antique toys which went to Sotheby in New York to be sold at auction. The rest of the toys were sent to England, where they are in a museum today. I enjoyed every minute of it. We wouldn't have traded it for anything. That is why when it closed, I felt so sad. Many a time I walked out through that plant wondering how many more times I could walk through there, seeing all of the equipment gone and all of the toys gone out of there. It made me very sad.
Marx employees believed the monkey works could never end, but when it did, many of the employees went on to even greater successes.
It helped us to a great extent in establishing our own business here. A lot of the people that originally worked at Marx as product managers or salesmen or whatever the case may be are very successful in their own right. They're vice presidents and managers of marketing and even presidents in some cases of well-known toy companies all over the country. And as a result, we are on a first-name basis with a lot of them, and it certainly helped us get started. We still have a lot of the original Marx people with us.
We're standing now in the former Marx Toy Plant assembly room in Erie, Pennsylvania. This is where hundreds of people work 3 shifts a day, assembling the metal toys in the 30s and 40s, and later plastic toys in the 50s and 60s. The big wheel ride-on toy, which every kid in America is familiar with, was developed here in this plant. Our company's association with Marx came about through the development of the pedal crank, which is used to power that tricycle. These cranks are still used by all the other toy manufacturers, carrying on the tradition of the big wheel, and are still produced here in this building, which used to be the world's largest toy company. Here's a machine that was custom built for Louis Marx around the turn of the century. It's one of a number that we have here, still producing components today. This machine has probably produced millions of toys over the years, and we use it in daily production.
Marx toys will never be forgotten, whether tin or plastic. Marx Toys was sold to Quaker Oats in 1972 for the sum of $52.3 million. 6 years later, it was resold by Quaker Oats to the British firm Dunby Convex for only $15 million. In 1979, the British firm went into bankruptcy proceedings. Today, however, the molds are again in production. Jay Horowitz, current president of American Plastics in Miami, purchased many of the toy molds and rights.
Our Marx Toys for the 90s is actually twofold. Firstly, we have the collector edition. This is being manufactured under the same standards and traditions that Marx manufactured the very same toys in the 1950s. Yes, we are adapting them for collectors, and they are authenticated, they are limited editions, and maintaining certain standards that are especially designed for the collectors, and they're manufacturing very few units. By the same token, now is the time to bring Marx back, or the Marx Renaissance, for the mass market. The policy that Louis Marx began was give them more toy for less money. And under the economic situation of today, more toy for less money will be the answer. Another one of Louis Marx's policies where he said, there's no such thing as a new idea. It's only a new twist to an old idea.
Children still enjoy the toys and variations of toys invented by Marx.
Mr. Marx was every child's joy. He gave fun for all of them. There were all kinds of toys, one to fit boys, one to fit girls. There were trains, there were guns, there were toys that were musical, and I think any child and any adult today who had some of his toys is very well pleased and would say he was a great man.
The Toy King died in 1982 at age 85. But the toys that Marx and his loyal court created will forever stand as a testament to the glory of a Tin Toy Dynasty.
This program is made possible by a grant from the Pennsylvania Public Television Network.